Hi everybody, here we are with Chapter 8, the last chapter in this first section of the course. We're going to be talking about planning, advertising, and integrated brand promotion. As you remember from BU 151, the importance of planning and coming up with a strategy and sticking to that plan and sticking to it, but also being flexible if you need to change it. There's a lot of time, a lot of money spent and advertising efforts, and so it's important to do it right. And as we talked about in BU 151, that not planning is like going on a trip without having a map. If you don't know what your destination is, you don't know how to get there, then it's just going to be a lot of wasted time. It might be a good adventure, but you're going to spend a lot of time and money. So here we go, the framework for Chapter 8. We're going to talk about the advertising plan, objectives and budgeting, strategy, execution and evaluation, and the agency role. So you go, just start off with a nice graphic, integrated brand promotion and action for KitKat. KitKat changes their ads based on the country that they're advertising them in. So on the left we see South Africa, and on the right we see Japan. So just the importance of adapting to your audience. Okay, so what is the role of the agency? So the role of the agency is really to help people determine what their current status is in that marketing environment, what their strengths and weaknesses are, helping them determine their strengths and weaknesses, trying to give them an objective view, and turning it into the advertising strategy, and then eventually finished ads and materials. So you want to be very specific in the plan, what your thinking is, what the tasks are that you need to complete, your timetable, and what the timetable is to be effective. And it should be a direct extension of the firm's marketing plan, which again should be a direct extension of the company's plan in general. So the idea of the integrated brand promotion really needs to be built into the plan as well to give as much of a consistency as possible. All right, so another ad that's hard to read, I'm sorry, but it's a pharmaceutical ad. And the idea is that when you advertise for prescription drugs, that information is really important, much more important than the image to consumers. And consumers should always be careful in terms of, what is it that they're being told, and be extra careful with what they're reading and hearing about, and also that the marketers need to be aware of that as well. Okay, so what is in the advertising plan? The introduction, the situation analysis, objectives, budgeting, strategy, execution, and evaluation. That's the straight out plan. Those are the components you would have in the plan. Those are the things you want to think about. So this is just what would be included in each plan. So there's an executive summary and an overview in the introduction. The situation analysis looks at what's going on at the current time, what has happened in the past, an industry analysis, a market analysis, and what's going on with your competitors. You want to be able to, for your objectives, tell what your quantitative benchmarks are going to be, how you're going to measure yourself, against what are you going to measure yourself, your measurement methods, how are you going to measure yourself, your criteria for success and time frame, and then budgeting, the methods, the amount, the justification for it. The strategy is how are you going to achieve it. We talked about there's different types of strategy. We like the marketing and the social societal marketing concepts. And then the execution, what's the copy strategy, what's the media plan, the copy strategy being what's the wording going to be, or what's the message going to be, the media plan, where are you going to show it, and then what are your integrated brand promotion activities and collateral that you'll be doing. And then at the end, you'll tell people in the marketing plan what criteria you're going to use to determine if it was successful, the methods you're going to use, and then also what the consequences are and what other contingencies might exist, how you might change the plan, if what's required, what are things that are, what's the requirement for the plan to go through. We'll talk about contingencies. Okay, so executive summary, most important points of the plan. We kind of went over all this. The overview, what's to be covered. It structures what the context is. Next, in the situation analysis is very important. That we've talked about these things also in BU 151, the SWOT analysis, the market expansion, looking at your customers, looking at what's going on in the micro and macro environment. And you also might be looking at international advertising if you're going to be going across international boundaries or cultural boundaries, and ethnocentrism. This idea is that ethnocentrism is this idea that we see things only from our own viewpoint and our own culture, so that we think, for example, the American way is the best way. And if we're, having an ad in, parts of Europe, we should really be thinking more about how will Europeans respond. So ethnocentrism is something that you really have to be careful to avoid. All right, situation analysis, self-reference criteria. So this idea that, again, like unconsciously referencing your own experience and looking at things, trying to look at things from another perspective. Historical context of the product, the industry, the brand, the company, and then industry analysis, trends within your entire industry. So what are trends in, ready-made foods, or what are trends in athletic equipment or athletic gear? And then these would be things that would make a difference with the industry, how it would make a difference in terms of how you're going to proceed. All right, the market analysis. What is the demand for the product? Is there a demand for it? Are you going to create the demand? Your competitors, what's going on with your competitors? What are their strengths, their weaknesses? What threats do they pose? That kind of thing. So how can we get out ahead of them? How are we going to be different from them? How are we going to position our product in comparison to them? All right, then talking about objectives. So is it to increase awareness of a product? Is it to create brand awareness or to get top of mind awareness? Or to change consumers' beliefs or attitudes about the brand also might be a goal. To influence people to buy, or either current target market or potential customers, and also to stimulate at least trial the brand. So are you trying to get sales? Are you trying to get new customers? Are you trying to create awareness? What is it that you're trying to achieve? You also might be asking whether or not you want to convert one-time brand users into repeat purchasers. Switch consumers from a competing brand to your brand. So, what is it? Just trying to straight out increase sales. So all these things, and it's an advertising plan. It's, unless you know what you want to achieve, you're not going to know how to get there. So it's important to determine beforehand what it is that you're trying to do. Or you're trying to, just maintain communication with people, and what is it that you're trying to, and where is it? Also, we talked about the product life cycle. Where are you in the product life cycle? It's a beginning, introduction, maturity, that kind of thing. That also is going to influence what some of your advertising objectives are. And it's easier. Things are always easier with numbers, but it's easier to be developed when advertising planners want to have some sort of quantitative, which is mean numbers, benchmark, specific measurements, and specify a time frame. I'm sure you've heard about SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So you want to think about those things. Okay. So this is also, I'm so sorry, it's another chart you can't read, but it just looks at sales and profit, advertising expenditure, and you're trying to determine, whether this was, how are you going to make it work in terms of the money. Okay. So budgeting methods. There are a variety of different ways you can budget the campaign. One is percentage of sales. So you can say the budget of the campaign is going to be based on X number percentage of prior year sales or your projected year sales. So you're going to spend 10% of sales, or you're going to spend 30% of sales. You could look at share of market. So how much is it, how is it? Are you trying to compare relative to how much market share you have? Are you trying to determine it what your competitors are doing, that kind of thing. Response models, again, helps to determine, objectivity is so important. And it's this idea, it's the mathematical relationship that associates money spent and sales generated. So there are response models, the people who are in finance will figure those things out. And as a marketer, you're going to be aware of that, but you won't actually be the ones who are necessarily crunching the numbers. Okay, objective and task approach also begins with the stated objectives, and then from that, you figure out how much it's going to cost, and you go backwards. It again depends upon your financial situation, depends upon what your goals are, the budgeting. Okay, so there are some steps that you can use in implementing the objectives and task budgeting approach. One would be, first, you'd want to determine the costs based on the build-up analysis, and then you want to compare the costs against industry and corporate benchmarks. Then you reconcile and modify the budget based on those two things, and then you determine the time frame for the payout, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about strategy. So strategy is the mechanism that you're going to do something, and execution is actually doing it. So the making and placing of the ads across all media. So coming up with the photographs or the videos or whatever it may be. So you want to look at the copy strategy. So what are the copy? What are the words and the methods? The media plan, where the ads are going to be placed, when are they going to be placed, and then also what your integrated brand promotion plans are. Events, contests, that kind of thing. Okay, and then evaluation is nearing towards the end. How will the agency be graded? What criteria are you going to use to decide if they did a good job or not? How long will the agency have to achieve the goals, the objectives? And measurement is super important for these things, because if you can't measure what you've done, then who knows whether that time and money you spent was worth the effort, and who knows if you have reached your goals. So it's just an example of Oreos. That Oreos has a really aggressive digital campaign, and they can social media digital campaign, and it's super easy to measure through digital engagement based on likes and shares and that kind of thing. And they're very successful with it. They are going after the hipster market, even though Oreos is such a, well, maybe it is because it's such a beloved staple of the American diet. They have 42 million Facebook fans. It's pretty good for a cookie that's been around a long time. All right, and then what's the role of the agency? It's important that the agency, if they have a specialized skill, and so our marketers really rely heavily on an agency, and being able to have a good relationship with them during the planning process is also very important. Working with an agency that you really trust, or being an agency that others trust, is very important. And so the idea is that all of this is an effort to create value for customers, and so you need to be able to work together to create that value and share the information and gather your expertise together. Okay, so that is Chapter 8, a quick view at Chapter 8 with planning. Even though it was a quick chapter, its importance really cannot be underestimated. So that's it, and we'll see you back here when we start the second part of the class with Chapter 9. Thanks, everyone.